Welcome back to another episode of History in Your Own Backyard. I'm your host, Susie Selleck. Today we are in Connersville, Indiana at the Fayette County Courthouse, and I'm joined by Dan Flum. Dan, thank you so much for having us.
Oh, you're welcome.
So, the Fayette County Courthouse is on the National Register of Historical Places, and I'm sure you have a couple of reasons for why it qualifies to be here. Please tell us about that.
Well, the first reason is that this courthouse was built in 1847 and was opened in 1849. At the time, it was like most of the courthouses at that time, and it was a Greek revival. And it is the second oldest courthouse in existence that has been in continuous use. So once it opened up, it hasn't been closed. And the other reason is they've since remodeled it and enlarged it a couple of times. But as you came in, and we'll see later on, the staircases, the open staircases that were put in 1890, and they are one of the few, if not the only, open staircase in a courthouse or public building in the state of Indiana. Plus, as we'll hopefully we can get a good shot later on, is a mural in here that was painted in about 1892. And it was just part of the paintings that were put into the courthouse there in the 1890s.
And this is the original. Has this been touched up?
When it was covered over in about the 1920s. The commissioners didn't maintain the roof, and so it leaked, and I believe it was the corner over here was damaged. So instead of trying to fix it up at that time, they just patched it up and painted over the ceiling. Well, if you remember back obviously neither one of us can, but in the 1880s and the 90s and the 20s and the 30s, people smoked in buildings.
Yes, they did.
And they had gas lighting. And so when they went to paint over the ceiling, they didn't clean it.
Oh, geez.
So they just put whitewash over the ceiling with all the smoke and everything up. So when we discovered it, it just came off with a scraper.
Wow. Because
it didn't adhere to the ceiling that well.
It was a good mistake.
It was a good
mistake
for
later
us.
That paid off.
And so later on, after we discovered it, we had a fundraising. Doug Howard was a big advocate for it. He was a commissioner at the time. And we raised the money to have this ceiling redone by the same people who redid the interior of the State House.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah, this is absolutely beautiful. In 2004 and 2005, this underwent an expansion. Had there been any expansions prior to?
Yes.
Okay.
The first one occurred about 1880. Part of the original courthouse was the jail, which was behind the judge's bench, and there was a 3-story jail, including a dungeon, and a circular staircase that went from the attic down to what's now the auditor's office. But it was a spiral staircase that was there, and so they took off most of the jail because they built a new jail to my back, and after they took the new jail, and so then they came in here and then they redid some work here in the courtroom and a couple of the other offices. In 1890, the commissioners decided they needed some more space, so they added 720 square or 760 square feet, and they put a tower on the north side and a tower on the south side and took off the Greek Revival look, changed the roof line, made it larger, added some dormers, fireplaces or chimneys, and just totally destroyed our original look. They made this Romanesque because in the 1890s, the courthouses were Romanesque.
Yeah.
You see it in Union, Rush County, and Wayne County, Union County. And so that was in the 1890s. Then in sometime in the 50s, they added another room to the back of what is still the recorder's office, an additional vault so they could store their records there. Their records were getting out of hand. And then in the 60s, they added another section to the northwest of the courthouse where they expand the auditor's office and also to put the extension office up on the second floor. And then they redid this courtroom, cut it down in size and changed the whole look of it. And then in the 70s, when Superior Court came in existence, they moved the extension office out and Superior Court took over that other section, and then obviously our other additional, we added about 29,000 square feet.
Dan, earlier when we walked in, we were talking about something with the wall, the faux granite. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, in 1849, when they built this building, they had a renowned artist, I don't remember his name right offhand, but the walls he put in, he made what they call faux granite. And when we removed the paneling that was put up in the 1960s, we found that finish, and we were able to. Our intentions were to keep it, and restore at least expose maybe a 4-foot section.
Right.
Unfortunately, the commissioners, at the recommendation of the architect's representative, decided to put drywall up on the walls in here because they could save $6,000. And talking with the guy who did it, I know him personally, he told me that he's pretty sure they fixed it with chemically.
Which is a bummer because you're not going to really be able to get that
probably
done,
not going to be able to do anything.
All right. Well, speaking of the walls, I noticed a couple pictures of some past presidents. So what's the significance of having George Washington and Abe Lincoln hanging up? Because I didn't see anybody else.
Well, George Washington was our first president and the leader of our revolution. And then Abe Lincoln was an Indiana boy. More or less.
So those are the stories and why we have those two up.
I guess. They've been there ever since I was here.
Well, there's some other good pictures. One of them looked a lot like you. And I guess he keeps some pretty good company up there on that wall with the other judges.
That's
who
correct.
else is up there? Okay. So what are some other special things about this courthouse that, maybe but like an outsider wouldn't know?
Well, if you go through the courthouse, we can see some different woodwork in the auditor's office. Not the auditor's office, the assessor's office, that may be from 1849, maybe 1880. Or it's hard to tell for sure.
And that's unique wood. That's unique woodwork. It's not anywhere else in the building.
Not anywhere else in the building. You cannot see it from the hallways. Only inside the room.
Okay. All right. And that's not the auditor's office. That was the
assessor's office.
Assessor's office.
It used to be the clerk's office, but now it's the assessor's office.
Okay. Dan, I've heard that is there a rumor floating around that this courthouse had burned? Is there some basis to that story? And if not, where did that come from?
Well, I guess it could be considered an urban legend. And and I don't know why, because I know the courthouse never burned. But it could be because a history book that someone wrote, there was an illustrated history of Fayette County, I think it date is like 1875. And in there it says the first courthouse was a 20 by 20 foot 2-story log building. Then another book that came out about 10 years later said that the first courthouse was a 40 by 40 foot brick building. So there's some discrepancy. I went through all the commissioner's records for that period of time, did not find, the only mention I saw about a courthouse was the brick building. So somebody just made a mistake. Now, we do know that there was a fire down in the Franklin County Courthouse. And Fayette County was part of Franklin County at one point in time, up until 1819. And there was a fire there, and so some of our records may have been burned. The most likely reason was you go down to the health department, and if you were born during a certain period of time, they don't have your birth certificate. And they say it would burn. And so people think that maybe the courthouse burnt. Well, what happened was we never really had a health department. We had a health officer who was a doctor, and the doctors kept all their records. And the one doctor at some point in time, I think maybe in the 50s, kept his records in a bank. And the bank burnt and some records were destroyed in that fire. So that's probably the real basis. Although there was a fire set in this courthouse back in the mid 80s.
Was anybody hurt?
Nobody was hurt, but somebody was drunk and he broke into the basement of the jail and he set fire to some papers. Luckily, because the police station was right behind us, as they were going back to their police station, they saw the fire out of the window. And the fire department was right there too, so they came over and immediately put the fire out, and the gentleman was put in jail for attempted arson and public intoxication.
What a dumb thing to do, but okay. So that clears up the urban legend then. Yes, you heard it right here first at History in Your Own Backyard. Dan Flum clearing up that urban legend. So the courthouse never did burn.
As far as we know, it did not burn.
All right. The record has been set straight. So now, is there anything that we haven't talked about yet regarding the structure here, the history of it, maybe like one of your favorite places to go when you're here?
Well, not really, other than my office, which was probably one of the nicest offices in the town.
Okay, all right.
You know, you always heard of the Oval Office. Well, we have our own office here in Fayette County.
Ooh, this will be exciting. The Oval Office is part of the tower, and the tower is?
The tower was built in 1890, and in about the 1950s or thereabouts, it was a cone top. And the cone was deteriorating, so instead of fixing it up, and I don't know if other county governments are that way, but sometimes the county council, county commissioners don't necessarily have the money to do repairs, so they just removed it. But they didn't do anything to protect the ceiling, to protect it. So it was left open, so water would come into, and was damage the ceiling in the judges' chambers, and eventually they put a silo roof on it.
Huh.
Now I was told that one of the commissioners had dealings with a silo company.
I was wondering, where in Indiana are you going to find a silo?
So they put a silo up. So it was very handy when people said, where's your office? I said, what's in the silo?
That's great.
And so then in part of the remodeling in 2004 was we removed the cone the silo and put a cone back up.
Very nice, very nice. Well, Dan, you certainly seem to know your history. You seem to certainly have a passion for this town, and obviously as a servant leader of Connersville, you were a great interview, and thank you for your time and
you're
for
welcome.
being able to share this with us. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you for watching another episode of History in Your Own Backyard. I'm your host, Susie Selleck. Today we are in Connersville, Indiana, here at the Fayette County Courthouse. Dan Flum, thank you for the awesome interview.
Well, you're welcome.
Remember,
Travel slowly and
stop often. Bye for now.